Hello, today I want to talk to you about squirting. Squirting is also referred to as female ejaculation, but really it's just ejaculation because, as I think we all know by now, not everybody with a vulva identifies as female. So what is squirting? What is ejaculation? All bodies can ejaculate. Ejaculation is one of those things that we associate with a penis, but everybody has a prostate gland, and that is where the ejaculate begins. The difference between ejaculation from a penis and ejaculation from a vulva is not just where the prostate is located. It's a bit confusing for some people because ejaculation from a penis has sperm in them. The fluid for ejaculate is created in the prostate. If you have a penis, it's from the walnut-shaped prostate that you can feel by inserting a finger anally, and it wraps around the urethral canal much lower in the shaft of the penis, in past the pubic bone, right in there. The ejaculate is then peppered with sperm from the testicles, and that's how you get this kind of like milky, fluidy concoction. The fluid created by the prostate is like essentially a sugary, watery composition that is intended to help the sperm live and thrive off of the sugars in the prostatic fluid. Squirt from a vulva is also basically sugar water, but it's much more controversial. The prostate in a vulva is called the Skene's gland, and it wraps around the urethral canal, has multiple ducts that kind of feed into the urethra between the bladder and the urethral opening. The G-spot is essentially what we call erectile tissue. It is composed of a network of tissue that is pumped with blood when you're aroused, and it gets hard, and for that reason it's really hard to feel the G-spot if you aren't already aroused because it's not going to be pumped full of blood. This erectile tissue is also referred to as the urethral sponge. It's a spongy network of tissue that is on the belly side of the vaginal canal, in between the vaginal canal and the bladder. The G-spot is just such a big area. Let me fucking find a fucking diagram. This is a diagram from female ejaculation and the G-spot. Remember, I don't always call it female ejaculation. This is a cross-section of the erectile tissue network in a vulva. This is the flaccid state. This is the erect state. This is the external portion of the clitoris that you may be familiar with. But look, it goes so deep inside the body. It's got this deep underbelly that, as you can see, is much larger than here. So it's much easier to stimulate that G-spot. If I was inserting my fingers into this person's vulva, I'd be going like this. Let's just get right down to business. When you want to squirt, what do you fucking do? You rapidly stimulate the G-spot intensely, with a lot of pressure. There's certainly such a thing as too much pressure, but your body can actually take a lot more than you think. If you have found your G-spot, and I highly recommend that you get a book like this if you want a little bit more of an in-depth guide on finding the G-spot. In short, the G-spot is 2 to 3 inches inside the body on the belly side. It responds to firm rhythmic pressure. It's not like the clit. The clit feels instantaneous sensation when you touch it, whereas you really have to build up a repetitive movement with the G-spot for you to feel anything. Also, not everybody likes G-spot stimulation, even though people are talking about it all the time. When it comes to internal stimulation, it's kind of like what you're supposed to be going for when you're stimulating a vulva. You might not like G-spot stimulation. You might just like external only stimulation, and that's a thing. A good way of locating it besides just being like, oh, it's 2 to 3 inches inside the body is once you're already aroused, insert as many fingers as feels comfortable to you, and if you swivel your fingers kind of like from side to side inside of the vaginal canal, you can kind of feel that there's like gutters on either side of the body of the G-spot. It's like literally a trench on either side, and you can feel when you're aroused that the body of the G-spot kind of like bellows down and really exaggerates those little crevices on either side. So what you're looking for is in between those two gutters, and not as far back as the cervix, although sometimes there's a pleasurable spot back in the cervix zone on either side of it, and that's the A spot. conversation for another day, right? You're looking for something that is bound by the parameters of those two gutters and is about 2 to 3 inches inside the body. Honestly, it took me a really long time to find my G-spot because my G-spot is like right at the vaginal opening, and that's not unusual either. This is also just to say that everyone's body is different, so if you don't find your G-spot immediately, that's totally fine. Some people spend a lifetime trying to find it, and sometimes we have to get books like this, which is how I fucking found mine, to really like hold our hand and walk us through it, and that's totally okay. Also, for anybody with a prostate that's located in their butt, you can access that in a similar way that you would stimulate the G-spot. Firm, repetitive motions, except this isn't a video about the walnut-shaped prostate that's in the butt. I'm only going to be talking about the Skene's gland variety of the prostate from here on out. So what does the Skene's gland look like? Here you go. So this is the outside of the body. This is the inside of the body. This is just showing 3 different variations on what the tissue, the duct and gland network looks like. When you are ejaculating, it might feel like you need to pee. The reason is because it is literally fluid that's being created in the urethral canal, and most of us have a habit of holding and clenching and therefore retroactively drawing that fluid up into the bladder when we don't let it expel outwards through the urethral opening. It's very common for it to kind of like be held up and build up in pressure, and if you don't let it go, then it's going to be drawn back up into the bladder. But some people really aren't able to ejaculate if something is inside of their body and therefore blocking the urethral opening. Like imagine having a dildo, a penis, a bunch of fingers inside of you. Some of us have a urethral opening that's right next to the vaginal opening. And so for that reason, if something's inside of your vagina, you're fully blocking the urethral opening, and therefore you're not going to be able to express much fluid outwards. So a lot of people like to quickly withdraw whatever's been inserted into them and rapidly stimulating their G-spot when they feel like they need to squirt. It's a good time to pull out, and that can also just like help the fluid kind of like not all squirt looks the same. It is very true that porn, I mean, all of porn is a fantasy exaggeration, but specifically with ejaculation from a vulva, a lot of people truly are performing and turkey basting water into the vaginal canal. Some people are peeing in porn. So just because your ejaculation doesn't look like what's in porn does not mean that there's anything wrong or different. A lot of porn ejaculation is staged, although there are certainly legitimate on-screen ejaculations. Don't be fooled by what you see in porn. Everybody's ejaculate comes in different quantities and amounts, and it can look a little bit different, and a lot of this has to do with where you are in the menstrual cycle, how hydrated you are. A whole slew of things go into causing ejaculate to look some type of way. Everyone's body is different, so some people might just have a little like bloop ejaculation, and some people might have like a streamy jet of it. There's really no way it's supposed to look, and it can smell all types of ways too, again based on where you're at in your cycle, how hydrated you are, if you're taking a new medication, if you're taking hormones. It can cause anything that's going into your body is affecting the fluids in your body, including your ejaculation. Honestly, ejaculation can smell like pee. It can smell really like salty, but sometimes it's really light and fresh and almost like floral smelling. It can have like a foresty smell to it. But yeah, sometimes it's really rank. As I always say, bodies, beautiful and disgusting, and sometimes your squirt is gonna be like really intense, and like that's a cool, normal, and beautiful thing. If you are afraid that you are going to pee and not ejaculate, I highly recommend that you empty your bladder fully before attempting to squirt. And this is just a little bit of an additional reminder to yourself that you're not gonna pee yourself, and also like if you do pee yourself, like that's okay too. Put a blanket down, put a towel down. Ooh, look at what my shirt did. Ooh, I feel like a mom who shops at Cachet in this shirt. What was I even talking about? If you want to get really up close and personal with your body fluids, you can literally do an experiment on your own body and smell your pee and then smell your squirt. It is going to be completely different. If you need the proof, that's a way of doing it. My Instagram account, Thongria, I have been quoted as having the catchphrase of "squirt isn't pee," and I loved that catchphrase for a very long time. I still think it's funny, but I think it's time that we kind of like move past this statement of "squirt isn't pee," because squirt is so much more than what it isn't. It is really frustrating because people have strong opinions on it, and I'll hear people all the time being like, it doesn't matter what it is or isn't, but I also do feel like that is a way of being like, but it's pee. What squirt is comprised of does have traces of urine, because guess what? It uses the same pipes. Ejaculation from a penis also has little bits of urine in it as well. There is very little research that has been done on ejaculation from a vulva, but here is an experiment that I love to cite because I really think it does a good job of myth busting. So, Dr. Zawiaczek, I hope I'm saying his name right, determined that the prostate in a vulva has two functions. The primary function of the prostate in a vulva is to manufacture, store, and emit the ejaculation. Apparently, the prostate also produces serotonin. Dr. Zawiaczek also discovered from his research that there is a tiny amount of ejaculate that continually seeps from the prostate into the vagina, which is very interesting. In 1991, Dr. Shannon Bell did an experiment on her own body. She ejaculated 4 times in one session into a bowl and collected 3/4 of a cup of ejaculate. She tested the fluid by pouring what she could into a test tube, capped it off, went to see her doctor at the neighborhood health clinic, and tested the ejaculate fluid. She then also urinated and ran the urine samples separately from the ejaculate samples. The tests showed that there were major differences between the ejaculate and the urine. Ejaculate has a higher pH, it also has more gravity, and it has less urea and creatine than urine. So yes, it has aspects of urine in it, but that doesn't make it urine. Call it whatever you want, but I find that most of the time when people are trying to really crusade for ejaculation not being a thing, it is just misogyny by people who are trying to get a reaction out of you. And I think that there is this misconception about it because it can have such a strong odor, as can ejaculate from a penis. Does ejaculating feel good? Sure. It definitely doesn't feel like an orgasm, and if you have a vulva, it's much easier to separate orgasm from ejaculation, whereas when you have a penis, you tend to ejaculate and orgasm at the same time. You can learn to separate the two, however, and I will link to this book as well as a book about learning to separate ejaculation from orgasm if you have a penis. Unfortunately, the little bit of research we do have on ejaculate is stuff that we know from cis men and cis women's bodies, so hopefully there will be more research about this, about trans bodies and gender non-conforming bodies, especially when hormones are involved, because that changes stuff. Now I just want to say, as an aside, that Deborah Sundahl, who wrote this book, is just absolutely one of my favorite humans. I feel like she's like my cool aunt who taught me how to become orgasmic, and for that I am forever indebted to her beautiful knowledge and the beautiful way she describes things. It just resonated with me. This book might not resonate with you, but it's worth a try if you're looking for a good resource. There's not too many books I trust about this subject matter. Back to talking about the Skene's gland, Dr. Zawiaczek also speculated that ejaculate served the purpose of kind of lubricating and coating the canal just to kind of protect the urethra against the intensity of what is contained in urine. It kind of cleans out the pipes, so to speak. Well, I know all about the Skene's gland, and let me tell you, it's not big enough to produce as much fluid as it does. Anybody who's trying to pick apart my body generally isn't worth my time. I know my body better than anybody else. I've seen what it can and can't do. So, if you don't want to just use your finger, The pure wand is a really great tool for helping you squirt. Obviously, it's an intense shape. I talked about it in my last video about my favorite toys a little bit because of the curve of it. If you're inserting it towards the belly side, so if I'm using it on my body, I'm using it this way, right? Because it bends down and away, it leaves a lot of room for fluid to come out of the urethral opening, whereas a thicker dildo would block the urethral opening, especially in my body, because my urethra is very close to my vaginal opening. Because the G-spot needs rapid, intense stimulation in order for you to orgasm, this tool with really intense rocking motions, tugging motions, as I was talking about in my last video, this is a really awesome squirt tool. You're not going to figure it out the first time you use it, and you're not going to probably squirt the first time you try, even with your fingers or a dildo or whatever. The important thing is that you come back to it and revisit it. You also don't have to squirt. If you don't really have any interest in learning how to squirt, you don't have to do it. I feel like squirting is one of those things like anal where people think that they're supposed to do it, but it's definitely not a thing that you must do. Ejaculation isn't mandatory. Sometimes you're not going to want to do it if you're fucking in the backseat of a car and you don't want to squirt all over your car. I mean, you can also just put a blanket down, but it's not always convenient. Just don't force it on yourself. If you are really forcing yourself to try to ejaculate, you will not ejaculate. It requires relaxation and awareness and practice and time. It just does not instantaneously happen. I am going to read you some brief steps on how to get yourself to ejaculate, but remember, you can follow these steps and still nothing will happen because it takes practice, okay? So step 1 is to build up an engorged and swollen G-spot by increasing arousal. So externally stimulate yourself, use a vibrator, use your hands, whatever turns you on. Step 2 is to build up that sensation of kind of what it feels like of needing to urinate. As you're intensely stimulating your G-spot, you might feel that sensation, and that is an ejaculation response. So just relax into it. Don't force it or clench. It may come and go. Step 3 is to practice pushing out the ejaculate. You want to stimulate your G-spot, kind of rock your pelvis, firmly push outward with your PC muscles as if forcing yourself to pee, and this is why it's important to empty your bladder first. Step 4 is to determine your readiness. If you want to ejaculate and orgasm, you essentially want to make sure you're feeling aroused, bear down, and make sure that your G-spot is feeling very swollen or firm. If all of those things are happening, you are maybe ready to ejaculate. Step 5 is to push the ejaculate while lying down. So you want to remove your fingers, your dildo, the penis, whatever. You want to bear down and push it out. And whether you are successful or not, you want to continue to stimulate yourself and go to the next step. You can go into another position. This is step 6. You can stand up. Doing it in multiple positions not only trains your brain to be able to ejaculate and orgasm in multiple positions, but it's kind of just proof to yourself that it's this reoccurring thing that you can do endlessly, whereas the bladder can contain only a finite amount of liquid, and if you're continuing to go and go and go and ejaculate, then again, further confirmation that it is in fact ejaculate. Step 7, push out another batch of ejaculate. Let it rip. And step 8 is to examine your ejaculate. If you want to collect it in your palm, wipe it from your body, your towel, whatever, smell it, look at it, get to know your bodily fluids. You don't have to do this every time you ejaculate, but if you are exploring, it's really valuable intel about your body. Step 9, go to the bathroom and urinate. You can create your own proof if you are still skeptical. And while I hate that I unfortunately need to approach squirting as more of a myth debunking segment than just talking about how to do it, I know that that is just still a huge myth surrounding ejaculation, and I just want to assure you that you deserve to feel the entire realm of pleasure if that is what you so desire. Go forth, Happy squirting. Squirt, squirt, squirt. Please tell me how you learned how to ejaculate. On a personal note, it's not a very frequent thing for me. It's kind of maybe like 1 out of 4 or 5 times I'm masturbating, I'll ejaculate. I happen to ejaculate a little bit more during partnered sex for whatever reason, but everyone's gonna have a different reaction. Everybody squirts differently, just like everyone's orgasms are different and special and beautiful. So go forth and let the fountain flood the world.